Hello everybody, this is Kate Wakelin here from Neuroendocrine Cancer Australia, coming into you live on Friday the 29th of May. It's nearly winter in a couple of days time, so I keep thinking it might be the last nice day here in Melbourne for autumn, and autumn keeps giving us another beautiful day, which it has done today. But I know winter's coming, and lots of us will be hunkering down. So yeah, just looking forward to a chat with you today here in the private Facebook discussion group, and I can see that someone's joined us, so that's really encouraging, because yeah, the technology, look, we've got a long way to go, haven't we? Thank you everybody for your patience last week with the conversation with Professor Alex Broom. Lots of you realise that dropped out really quickly, but I think the thing is that if it does drop out, we'll always put the video up later. So anyway, lovely to see you, lovely to join with you today. It's Reconciliation Week this week, and I'm not probably going to do a big blurb about special dates every time there's a date, because it's like, gosh, every week there's a number of days and things, but I actually think this one's really important, and it just crossed my mind that I haven't ever acknowledged where I am, so maybe I should start doing that. So I'm very grateful to be living on the land of the Wurundjeri people, who are part of the Kulin Nation. One of the things that brings me great joy about living in this part of the world is I get to run along the Yarra River, and the traditional name for that is Birrarung. So, and I'm sure I've pronounced that really poorly, so my apologies for anyone who's watching this who knows better. Maybe you can give me a tutorial on how to pronounce that more effectively. But yeah, I really appreciate the ability to spend time in this beautiful land. So yeah, just wishing anyone who's Indigenous you know, a meaningful and wonderful Reconciliation Week. I'm thinking of you, and I pay respects to elders, past, present and emerging. So I wanted to just provide a brief update about coronavirus, which continues to be settled in terms of the numbers around Australia. I think a lot of us are still bracing, wondering if it's the calm before the storm of the second wave. It really remains to be seen. There's lots of work being done on vaccines that we've heard of this week, which is exciting, and I know that we're all really waiting for a vaccine. There's been, so I know I talked about this last week about masks. The official line is still that you need to be wearing a mask if you're concerned about giving someone coronavirus, if you feel like you might have it. But I know a lot of people with cancer, and a lot of people more generally are asking big questions about whether, as we relax social distancing and people get out in the community more, whether it might be wise for people to start wearing masks as a preventative. We're working hard to produce some information about that in liaison with other charities. It's actually it's a little bit tricky because there's not good quality evidence about it. So it's not like we've run clinical trials on cloth masks any time in the recent past to know how effective they are. So obviously everyone's pretty hesitant to put their name beside things that are aren't evidence-based. So anyway, we're trying to get some information together for you about that. But it's, you know, it's worth thinking about, doing some research yourself, talking to your doctor about your own individual risks. As we've said a few times, not everybody with neuroendocrine cancer is suffering from a compromised immune system as such. So it may be that there are plenty of people in this Facebook group whose risk of getting sick with coronavirus is not a great deal more than the general community. But having said that, I'm a general community member, and I don't think any of us want to catch this virus. It's nasty. The other thing I just wanted to mention about coronavirus is that there is another Facebook Live session today. So if you aren't already all Facebooked out, I'm sure this one will be recorded as well. Professor Sancha Aranda from Cancer Council Australia is being interviewed live at 4 o'clock. Talking about the impact of coronavirus for people with cancer in Australia. So I think that's going to be really interesting. I'm hoping that I'll be able to watch that myself, and I'll post a link up to that as soon as I finish this video. So if you're interested in watching that, you'll be able to hop online and do that. And as I said, I'm sure it will be recorded as well. I just did want to follow up a question that came to me during the week that does come up from time to time, and I thought, oh look, I'll spend a couple of minutes just talking about that today because I haven't managed to get back to the lady to tell her what the answer was. So a lady from WA contacted me and said she'd gone for her mammogram. She's got neuroendocrine cancer. She's gone from her mammogram, and the people who do the mammogram said, oh, you don't need to worry about having a mammogram because your scans will pick up any abnormalities in your breasts. And she wondered if that was actually the case. And I wondered if that's actually the case too, because, you know, from what I know, I wondered about that. Anyway, I did contact one of our nuclear medicine physicians, Dr. Grace Kong from Peter Mac in Melbourne, and she, the information that she gave to me was that normally people, especially with low-grade neuroendocrine tumours, if you're just having the gallium-68 PET scan, so that's the dotatate scan or the gatate scan or the gallium scan, sometimes it's called, it's got different names depending on which side of which river you live on, which is another topic for another day. But her opinion was that probably that's not going to pick up areas of calcification in breasts and areas of concern that would be picked up in a mammogram. And certainly the oncologists who are looking at your PET scans and any of your scans will be looking at the areas where we know that neuroendocrine tumours are. So they'll be looking at your liver, at your bowel, at your pancreas, at your gut, at your bones, wherever we're sort of focusing on. They might not be paying a lot of attention to other parts of your body. So I think the advice is that it is still very much worthwhile going for your screening mammogram. So I will make sure that I send a quick email to that lady. But if any of you other people were wondering, same goes with bowel screening, pap tests, so I know that's all changed in the last few years as well. But all of these cancer screening tests that we offer for the general community, they all still apply if you've got neuroendocrine cancer. So I just thought it might be helpful for me to tidy that one up. Today I wanted to focus on a phenomenon that gets mentioned so many times between my patients and myself in our conversations. I read about it online, I hear about it a lot, and that is what we traditionally call chemo brain. And that is when someone with cancer experiences changes in their cognitive ability, and that can be like muddled thinking or feeling like your thinking is slowed. Sometimes people call it like chemo fog or brain fog. It can mean that sometimes it can be difficult to find words. Sometimes you might forget silly little things that were just on the tip of your tongue, and sort of, I guess, bigger memory problems. And so sometimes people with cancer experience this. Actually up to about 67% of people can experience this phenomenon. So it's really very common. One of the things that was interesting to me a couple of years ago in a conference was that although this is often called chemo brain, a lot of people who aren't having chemotherapy actually report these sorts of changes in their cognitive function. And the researcher who I was listening to a presentation from a couple of years ago was talking about some very interesting mouse studies with some poor little mice where they got them to run around a maze and basically measured how long it took for them to learn that maze to get to their food reward. They then tested these mice with a cancer. So they, I'm not going to talk about how they gave these mice cancer, but they developed a cancer in these mice. And then they measured the amount of time that they took to reach the end of the maze to their food reward. And the times were really different. They measured mice having radiotherapy, they measured mice having chemotherapy, they measured mice where they weren't having any treatment at all. And actually all of them had impairments. So it seems to be less tied to chemotherapy than we originally thought, which is, I think, really interesting. And makes it make more sense that it's not just people who are having chemo that are having these issues. So I guess the theory is still out there. We're still really not sure of why people with cancer get this issue. Certainly we can understand from a chemotherapy point of view or a radiotherapy point of view, there's lots of cell turnover going on, there's different chemicals being released that might relate to that, but one of the theories is around the inflammatory markers or the chemicals that tumours themselves produce that might slow thinking down, slow down cognition. One of the other things that I think is really important for people with NETs is that, or two things. The first thing is that you can get cognitive changes when you're depressed. So, and we know that depression is actually really common in cancer. So it's important to talk with your doctor about what you're experiencing so that you can help kind of disentangle what the difference is between and whether this is chemo brain or whether actually it might be depression that's really coming out in a cognitive way for you. And I guess the major differences are that in depression we know that people experience like a loss of pleasure, a loss of joy, a loss of anticipation, increased risk, increased levels of things like guilt and sadness and sometimes anger, but it's complicated, and sometimes if you're in this maze yourself it can be difficult to disentangle it all, and you often will need a professional to help find your way through to the answer. And sometimes it's going to be a, you know, see all of the above. But the other thing with NETs that we know, and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, is that actually there's a high risk for people who get carcinoid syndrome of a deficiency in vitamin B3, and that can also result in cognitive issues. So we want to make sure that your vitamin B3 level is, if you've got carcinoid syndrome, that you're taking the appropriate supplements. We want to be talking with the doctor about whether there might be some depression at play. And if all of those things are sorted out, then let's start talking about what we can do about the brain fog or the chemo brain. So you can have neuropsychological testing done to prove that this is actually the case. So there's particular specialists in psychology who do a raft of cognitive testing, and they can actually put a name to it. Now lots of hospitals won't have a neuropsych department, and I think from my point of view common sense prevails, and if you feel like your thinking has slowed down and that your memory's not as good, you know yourself really well. If you're with someone, if a loved person's going through cancer and you're noticing this in them, common sense prevails. You know that person, you know that they're not themselves, and so it's time to start thinking about it and what to do about it. One of the interesting things that can be done for chemo brain is exercise, which is completely outside of the square, and I was really surprised when I heard that. But you know, having just come fresh off the Let's Walk for Nets walking challenge, maybe this is a reason why you shouldn't delete your app and keep getting out there and walking. So certainly aerobic exercises like walking and running and dancing and cycling have been shown to be effective, but also some resistance and strength training studies have been done that have also shown that there's some effectiveness there. So, oh gosh, another reason is if we didn't need more things to nag us to get out there and be active, but it's, you know, it's going to help. And I guess the other thing with those is they'll also improve mood. So that's, you know, if there's depression at play, certainly have to talk to your doctor, but we know that physical activity is going to help with that. The other thing is that there's some online training, so there is some evidence that you can do brain retraining with chemo brain or chemo fog or cancer fog, whatever you want to call it. There's a couple of websites out there. One's called Lumosity, which is a commercial site, and I think there's probably, I haven't actually had a really good look at it, I should do that. And maybe if you've tried Lumosity, you can tell me what you've thought of it and how much it costs. I think that would be really interesting for us all to know. But there's another one called Brain HQ, which was actually developed as a cancer brain retraining intervention, and it's still live on their website. So I'll post links to both of those sites after this live feed. And yeah, if you give it a go, let us know how you go. I think it would be really interesting to see what your experience of chemo brain or brain fog or cancer brain or whatever you want to call it is, and what you're doing about it, what you've tried, and if you've ever tried the online brain retraining and whether that's been effective for you. The other thing I would just mention is that there are some chemotherapy agents that we know are culprits in this. And I noticed on the list that 5-FU is one of the key ones, and one of the most common chemotherapies that people are on with NETs is you will have known it as Captem or capecitabine and temozolomide, or sometimes it's 5-FU that's been put in through a drip. So capecitabine is an oral version of 5-FU. So that just made me prick up my ears. That made me think, gosh, well, people with NETs who are on chemotherapy are actually on one of the key culprits for this phenomenon. So just worth, I guess, monitoring yourself. It's not that you're losing your mind, it's actually that it's really normal. For most people it does get better, but it can continue way after the cancer is faded into a background if you've got a tumour that can fade into a background. And I know I've seen some stats that are saying that, you know, even after 10 years of post-chemotherapy, the percentages are low after that amount of time, but it is something that can really last. So yeah, it's worth having a look at that, having a think about it. And if you want more information, then let's talk about it in a Facebook group, or you can give me a ring if you're particularly concerned, and certainly talk with your doctor about it. You might be going to a hospital where there is a psychology service who can help with that retraining process. So yeah, definitely talk to your doctor about it. Just, I'm going to keep it really brief today. That was my goal. When I woke up this morning, I thought, Facebook Friday, we're going to go concise today. So it's going to be hopefully a shorter one if I can stop yabbering on. Just a couple of plugs. The first one is that we've got an e-newsletter. I think probably a lot of you will be aware about this. But if you're not, it's worth signing up. So the way you sign up is via our website, which is www.neuroendocrine.org.au, and I'll put a link in the notes. The e-newsletter comes out each month, and it's a really great, I guess, a condensing of the current research that's going on, news from us, news from around the world, and you know, events and things to be watching out for in the neuroendocrine cancer space. So I'd really encourage you to have a really good look at that. It'll be out about 3:30 this afternoon, I'm told, so keep a look at your inboxes for that. The other thing I just wanted to plug was we've got our online support groups next round starting up. So next week we've got Brisbane and Perth who are meeting. Now Adelaide, you were going to meet next week, but actually we've had a change of plans because Adelaide actually have a guest speaker talking about carcinoid heart disease, which I think is going to be, and I've got that on my list to talk about for a Facebook Friday, so I'll be watching this presentation with interest, and that's the week after next, so that's actually been shifted to the 9th of June. That week we've also got Melbourne, Royal North Shore and Gold Coast, and then the following week is a big plug because not only do we have Hobart and Canberra meeting, but we also have the next meeting of our online support group, and we met recently during the day on a Friday after Facebook Friday, and that chat went really well. I think that was a really lovely way of people connecting. One of the lovely things about it was that pretty much everybody in that chat was from the country, and you're exactly the people who I know it's difficult to get to face-to-face support groups. So that's exactly the people where we're inviting to come to these online groups. So they meet via Zoom, and Zoom is a bit like being in the Brady Bunch, but you know, the people are far more interesting and special because they're living and affected by NETs. I help facilitate that group, but it's not a formal meeting with a set agenda. It's really to talk about what's going on for you and your own experiences. So the next meeting of that group is on the 16th of June. It's a Tuesday in the evening from 7 o'clock till 8 o'clock in the eastern states. So that'll mean that Perth is 5 o'clock. That'll mean that Adelaide's 6:30. And if you're in Darwin, I'm sorry, I can't remember what the time zone difference is, so you'll need to look that up. I think Facebook tells you anyway what time it's going to be in your location. Today I set up a Facebook event for that meeting. For people, if you want to attend, we send a Zoom link out via private message to anyone who has indicated that they're going. So if you've clicked that you're going to the meeting, you'll get a link that day via your Facebook Messenger. And just keep a lookout because the message comes from me, but if we're not Facebook friends, it might go to your message requests folder, and that can be a little bit subtle to find. So yeah, just keep a lookout for messages. If you are in doubt, if you've clicked that you're going to that meeting and you haven't got a message yet, send me a message via private message. Which reminds me, so Private Messenger is a really fantastic tool for social networking on Facebook, and it works fantastically for me. My personal, my personal Facebook wall, which is not this one, chatting with my friends and sharing photos of my silly kids and things like that. But for my Kate Wakelin neuroendocrine cancer account, I only use Messenger really to run the private discussion group and to run these online web events. If you want to get in touch with me with a question about your neuroendocrine cancer, please send me an email, because it will get lost in Messenger. The Messenger is flying with activity about who's requested membership for which group, because there's several groups, and it just the messages get lost in there. So my email address is netnurse@neuroendocrine.org.au, and that's a great way to practice spelling neuroendocrine, because I know that's a tricky one. I've certainly got it wrong a few times, but netnurse@neuroendocrine.org.au is the way to get in touch with me if you've got questions about your particular situation, or you want to be linked in with more supports, or you've got a question, so you need to get in touch with me. So I'm going to leave it there. It's lovely to see you all. Thank you for everyone who joined in. I'm still waiting for a date for our surgery and Net's Facebook Friday. I was full of high hopes that would be very quick, and it's not going to be quite as quick as I thought, but I'm still nagging this surgeon to line up a date. Keep the questions coming. I've got a big list of potential things to talk about. I know I'm preparing one on somatostatin analogues and looking at the two different types of long-acting somatostatin analogues. That may be next week if I get my act into gear. We'll just have to wait and see what else comes up. But yeah, lovely to see you. I hope you have a good weekend. I hope you get to go outside, and I guess if I was going to give you any homework this week, it might be to actually maybe look up what's the indigenous land that you live on, and maybe just spend a moment reflecting on what it is about living there that you feel grateful for. What's special about living in that part of the world? I can just see a message saying I'm too late. If you just join me, that's absolutely fine. The recording will be up. So nice to see everybody, and take care. Have a great weekend. Get out in the sunshine if you can find some. Let me know how you go with Chemo Brain, and I'll look forward to talking soon. Bye everyone.